The maid who refused to fear the cursed princes. They told Mara Ellery the job would change her life. They didn't tell her it might end it. On a rain-stained night in a city that never cared who broke first, Mara stood outside a luxury hotel bathroom and listened to a woman laugh at her through the door, like Mara's humiliation was entertainment. Her manager had locked her out of the service elevator again, by mistake, then blamed her for being late. Customers snapped their fingers at her like she was a pet. Even the streetlights looked tired. Mara wasn't weak. She was exhausted. Exhausted from working 2 jobs and still choosing between rent and her little brother's asthma medicine. Exhausted from smiling politely while people treated kindness like permission to step harder. Exhausted from pretending she didn't notice the way the world measured worth by shoes, not soul. So when a sealed envelope appeared in her locker, no return address, no sender, just her name written in ink that looked too dark to be normal, she opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single card. Private household staff, live-in maid/childcare support. Pay, $9,500 weekly. Location, confidential. Requirements, discretion, strong heart, absolute silence. Note, you will work with children. Beneath it was a second sheet, smaller like an afterthought. Do not judge what you see. Do not fear what you hear. Mara laughed once, sharp, disbelieving, because nothing in her life had ever offered her mercy in the form of money. Then she saw the final line. Sign the NDA. Be at Pier 17 at 3 a.m. or forget this ever existed. Her first thought was trap. Her second thought was her brother wheezing in the night and the pharmacy receipt she'd folded into her wallet like a prayer. At 2:58 a.m., Mara stood at Pier 17 in borrowed boots and a coat too thin for the wind. The river rolled black beneath the dock. Fog clung to the water as if it belonged there. A boat waited with no lights. A man stepped out of the fog as if the fog had been holding him in its arms. He wore a charcoal suit that didn't wrinkle in the wind and gloves so clean they looked untouched by life. His hair was silver at the temples, but his eyes were young, sharp, trained, watchful. Mara Ellery, he said as if confirming a private list. Yes. He handed her a pen. Read. Sign. Mara glanced at the papers. The first pages were normal legal language, thick and intimidating. The middle pages weren't. Clauses about biological hazards. Clauses about non-human security protocols. Clauses about voluntary acceptance of risk in the event of physical harm. Her breath caught. Is this a joke? The man didn't blink. No, miss. What kind of family? We'll pay what you were offered, he cut in, voice calm, because they require what others cannot provide. Mara stared at the signature line until her vision blurred. How did you find me? Because you returned a wallet with $800 inside, he said simply, when you could barely afford dinner. Mara froze. She'd done that last week. A businessman had dropped it on the sidewalk. Mara could have kept it. No one would have known. But she had returned it anyway. Her throat tightened. That doesn't mean I'm brave. It means you are decent, the man replied. And in this house, decency is rare. The wind shoved at Mara's shoulders as if trying to push her away. She thought about her brother. About bills. About the way life punished people for being soft. Then she sighed. The man took the papers and gave her a small, heavy tag on a chain. It was black metal etched with a crest, a crown above 3 stars. Wear it at all times, he instructed. Do not remove it. Do not show it to anyone. Where are we going? He looked past her, toward the water, toward the fog, toward something unseen. To a place the world pretends does not exist. The boat moved like a shadow. The city fell away. The fog thickened. And then Mara noticed something that made her stomach flip. There were no other passengers. No staff. No crew. Just her, and the man, and the quiet. As if the world had decided to hold its breath. Hours later, she couldn't tell how many, her phone had lost signal long ago, the boat docked at a private shoreline where black stone cliffs rose like teeth. A path climbed through pine trees so tall they blocked the moon. At the top of the hill stood a mansion that didn't look built. It looked summoned. Dark towers. Iron balconies. Windows like watching eyes. The air itself felt colder around it as if warmth was not allowed to linger. Valemont Manor. Mara didn't know how she knew the name. She just felt it, the same way you feel you're being watched even when you can't see anyone. The front doors opened before she knocked. A woman stood inside, tall, stiff, immaculate. Her hair was pinned so tightly it pulled at her face. Her uniform was perfectly pressed. Her expression wasn't unkind. It was empty. You are late, she said, though Mara wasn't. I'm sorry. Don't apologize, the woman snapped. We do not reward weakness here. Mara swallowed. I'm Mara. The woman's eyes flicked over her, measuring. Mrs. Howrow. Head of staff. Howrow turned without waiting and walked through a hall so grand it felt like a museum of a life Mara had never been allowed to imagine. Portraits watched from the walls, beautiful faces, cold eyes. Candles burned without smoke. The silence was too perfect, as if the house itself had been trained. Rules, Howrow said, voice crisp. You will learn them now. Mara kept pace, trying not to stare at the dark velvet curtains, the marble floors, the silver decor that gleamed like moonlight. Howrow stopped at a corridor blocked by a heavy iron door. Mara's skin prickled. You will work in the West Wing, Howrow said. You will not leave it without permission. What's in the West Wing? Howrow's jaw tightened as if Mara had stepped on something fragile. The princess. Mara blinked. Princess? Howrow inserted a key into the iron lock. The sound of it turning was like a verdict. Triplets, Howrow continued. Heirs of the Night Crown. Mara's heart thumped. The Vampire King? Howrow's eyes flashed with warning. Do not speak that title in the West Wing. Mara's mouth went dry. So the rumors are real. The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. Do you know what the world says about them? Howrow whispered. That they were born cursed. That their mother died screaming. That their blood rots anything it touches. Mara's breath caught. That's enough, Howrow hissed. Here are your rules. She lifted one finger. 1. You will not seek the king. 2 fingers. 2. You will not mention the queen. 3 fingers. 3. You will not open the children's restraints. Mara stared. Restraints? Howrow's expression finally cracked, just a little, revealing fear. If they bite you, Howrow said, voice trembling despite her control, you do not become one of them. Mara whispered, then what? You decay, Howrow said bluntly. From the inside. And they will watch. Because they won't understand what they did. Mara's stomach turned. They're children. They are weapons that learn to cry, Howrow snapped. You will feed them through the slots. You will clean their room without speaking. You will not make eye contact. You will not offer comfort. Pity is how the last girl lost her job. Mara caught the careful way Howrow avoided a more honest word. Life. Howrow shoved a ring of keys into Mara's hand. The metal was cold enough to sting. If you break the rules, the king will not save you. He will not even mourn you. Mara forced herself to ask, why would he do that to his own sons? Howrow's eyes moved, just for a second, toward a portrait down the hall. A beautiful woman painted in white silk, hands resting over her stomach, eyes soft as dawn. Because grief makes monsters out of men, Howrow murmured. Then she straightened again like a door shutting. Enter. The iron door opened. A smell hit Mara first, stale air, old food, and something sharp that made her eyes water. The room was massive, but it wasn't a nursery. It was a cage. No toys. No color. Steel shutters over the windows. Stone walls. A single overhead lantern that barely lit the far corners. The floor was scratched, stained, worn down as if something had been dragging itself across it for years. Mara stepped inside, heart hammering. Hello, she called softly. Silence. Then quiet, broken, she heard it. A whimper. Not the growl of monsters. The sound of frightened children trying not to be noticed. Mara's gaze shifted toward the corner where the lantern barely reached. 3 small shapes huddled together on ripped bedding. They looked 6 or 7. They were thin, too thin. Their cheeks were hollow. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, veins visible like bruised maps. Their hair was dark and tangled. And on their faces, Mara's breath stopped. Leather muzzles strapped tight around their mouths. Locked behind their heads. Their hands were wrapped in padded cuffs like mittens, preventing them from gripping anything. One of them, slightly taller, lifted his head. His eyes were not vibrant crimson like the movies. They were dull. Tired. The color of dried blood. Don't, he rasped. Don't hurt us. Mara's eyes burned. Howrow said behind her, do your work. Mara turned. They can't even eat. They don't deserve comfort, Howrow said coldly. They deserve containment. Mara stared at the children again and felt something in her chest rise, an old, familiar rage she usually swallowed to survive. This wasn't discipline. This was cruelty. Howrow placed a cooler by the door. Feed them the synthetic blood. Through the tubes. Clean up afterward. Leave. Then she left without another word, locking the iron door behind her. Mara stood in the middle of the room, holding keys that suddenly felt like chains. One of the boys crawled forward, slow, cautious, trembling. "Please," he whispered through the leather. "The red water." Mara knelt, keeping her voice gentle. "What's your name?" The boy flinched as if names were dangerous. The taller one answered, voice rough. "Silas. I'm Silas. That's Ezra." "Leo." The smallest, Leo, looked at Mara with eyes too old for his face. Are you here to punish us?" Mara shook her head fast. "No. I'm here to help." Silas let out a broken laugh. "No one helps." Mara opened the cooler. Inside were 3 bags of cheap synthetic blood. Gray-red watery sad. She carried them over and handed one to Leo. He nudged it with his muzzle, frustrated. He couldn't grip it. He couldn't bite it. He couldn't drink. Mara's throat tightened. "How do you?" "Tube," Ezra mumbled. "Little hole." Mara looked at the muzzle and saw a small opening where a straw could be inserted. Something in her snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly like a thread pulled too far. Mara reached for the keys. Silas' eyes widened in terror. "No. Don't." Mara paused. "Why?" "Because if you take them off," Silas whispered, shaking, "we become beasts." Mara looked at the boys. They didn't look like beasts. They looked like children who had been told they were beasts until they believed it. Mara's hands trembled as she found the smallest key and moved slowly, giving Leo time to pull away. "It's okay," she whispered. "I won't hurt you." Leo was shaking so hard his whole body vibrated. Mara unlocked the muzzle. It fell away. Leo's face was raw beneath it, sores where leather had rubbed him for years. His lips were cracked. His chin was bruised like he'd been pushed down too many times. Leo opened his mouth as if he'd forgotten how. Mara gently placed the blood bag in his hands. Then she helped him tear the seal. "Drink," she whispered. Leo drank. And he didn't attack her. He didn't snarl. He didn't turn feral. He drank like a starving child, messy and desperate, tears sliding down his cheeks as if he was ashamed to need anything. Mara's eyes filled. She unlocked Ezra next. Then Silas. They drank in silence. Then, when they finished, they stayed close, not because Mara forced them. Because warmth was new. Because kindness was unfamiliar. Because fear had taught them to cling to the first person who didn't treat them like poison. Mara found a basin in an attached washroom and warmed water. She cleaned their faces with a cloth. She spoke softly, like you speak to animals that have been hit too often. "What happened to you?" she asked, barely a whisper. Silas stared at the floor. "We killed her." Mara froze. "What?" "Our mother," Silas said. His voice cracked. "When we were born. They said we drained her. That we have her poison in our blood." Ezra swallowed. "That's why Father can't look at us." Leo's eyes shimmered. "He says we're cursed." Mara felt cold crawl up her spine, not because of the boys. Because of the story. A mother dies. 3 heirs are born. The king disappears. The sister takes control. The children are hidden. The world hears whispers. Cursed, monsters, poison. Mara's instincts, the same instincts that helped her survive streets and landlords and cruel bosses, screamed that this wasn't fate. This was a plan. Before she could speak again, the iron door creaked. The children jolted, scrambling backward like frightened rabbits. Their hands reached for muzzles that weren't there. Mara stood instantly, stepping between them and the doorway. A figure entered. Tall. Dressed in black velvet like the night had wrapped itself around him. His hair was dark and unkempt, falling over a face so beautiful it hurt, sharp cheekbones, stern mouth, eyes that glowed a rare violet, like thunder trapped in gemstones. But the beauty was haunted. Grief lived in him like an illness. Mara knew without being told. King Alaric Valemont. The Vampire King. His gaze landed on the muzzles on the floor. Then on the children, cleaner, calmer, human-looking in a way the world had been denied. Then on Mara. The temperature in the room dropped. "Who are you?" he asked, voice low, vibrating through stone. Mara swallowed fear like it was a bitter pill. "My name is Mara. I'm the new maid." His eyes narrowed. "And why have you unleashed them?" Mara lifted her chin. "Because they were starving." Alaric took one step forward. He moved like a predator that didn't need to rush. Power pressed against Mara's skin as if the air itself had become heavy. "You don't understand," he said, voice tight with restraint. "If they bite." "They didn't," Mara snapped, surprising herself. "They drank and cried. Like children." Alaric's jaw clenched. His gaze flicked to Leo's face, fully visible now, vulnerable. For the briefest moment, the king flinched as if something inside him broke. Leo, still trembling, whispered a word so small it shattered the room. Daddy? Alaric's expression cracked, just a fraction, then hardened again like ice sealing over a wound. His voice turned sharp. Chain them again. Mara's stomach dropped. No. Alaric's eyes flashed violet. You will obey. Mara didn't move. She didn't know where the courage came from, maybe from years of being stepped on, maybe from looking at 3 boys who had been caged like shame. She said very quietly, they are not cursed. Alaric's mouth tightened. You have no idea what you're accusing me of. I'm accusing you of being afraid, Mara replied, heart pounding, and calling it mercy. The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. For a breath Mara thought he would kill her. Instead, Alaric's gaze drifted back to Leo's face again, like he couldn't help it, like he was starving too, but for something he refused to touch. Then he turned away sharply, cloak sweeping like shadow. Pack your things, he commanded without looking at her. You leave at dawn. He left, slamming the door so hard the lantern trembled. The children stared at Mara with wide eyes. Mara's hands shook. She should have packed. She should have run. But she looked at the muzzles on the floor and realized something. A king who feared his own sons that much was either protecting the world from them, or protecting someone else from the truth. Mara sat on the floor beside the triplets as the night deepened. She didn't put the muzzles back on. She didn't chain them. She simply stayed. And when Leo's small fingers curled around her sleeve like he was afraid she would disappear, Mara made a promise to 3 cursed princes who had never known kindness without pain. I'm not leaving, she whispered. Not until I find out what really happened to your mother. Outside the West Wing, the mansion remained perfectly silent. But somewhere in its dark halls, secrets began to wake. And in the shadow of the night crown, someone powerful was watching Mara with interest that did not feel like mercy. It felt like warning. The Queen's diary and the lie in the blood. Dawn came thin and gray through cracks in the shutters, cutting pale lines across stone. Mara had not slept. She had spent the night cleaning the nursery until her knuckles reddened, scrubbing away years of neglect like she could erase pain with effort. She found clean linens in a locked closet and made the boys' beds that didn't smell like fear. She warmed water, washed their hair carefully, spoke to them like they mattered. For the first time, Silas didn't flinch when she moved too fast. For the first time, Ezra laughed softly when soap bubbles floated like tiny moons. For the first time, Leo fell asleep without whispering sorry in the dark. When the iron door banged open, Mara stood up, bracing. Mrs. Howrow stormed in with fury written on her face. Then she stopped. Her eyes locked on the clean children, the discarded muzzles, the fresh beds. Her face shifted from rage to something else. Fear. What have you done? She hissed. Mara stepped forward. I fed them properly. I cleaned them. I treated them like what they are not. Howrow snapped. You foolish girl. You've endangered. A voice cut through the air, low and lethal. Leave. Howrow went rigid. King Alaric stood at the doorway, shadowed by morning light that dared not touch him. His eyes looked worse now, sunken, rimmed with red. He had the exhausted look of a man who hadn't slept in years, not truly. Howrow forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Your Majesty, she has violated strict protocol. Lady Beatrix. Alaric's gaze flickered, dangerous. Are you giving orders in my home, Howrow? Howrow's breath hitched. No, sire. Then leave, he repeated. Howrow's jaw tightened, but she bowed and fled. Alaric stepped inside. The air changed, pressure, power, cold elegance. The triplets froze. Silas and Ezra instinctively reached for muzzles that weren't there, their bodies remembering what their minds had accepted. We deserve chains. Leo stared at his father with trembling hope, then lowered his eyes as if hope was forbidden. Mara placed herself slightly in front of them. Alaric noticed. His voice softened only a little. Why are you still here, human? Mara held his gaze despite Howrow's warning. Because someone has to stop being afraid. A harsh sound escaped him, almost laughter, almost pain. Afraid? I am the Night Crown. Mara's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. Then act like it. Look at them. Alaric's gaze flickered toward the boys. His jaw clenched as if it hurt to see them. They are dangerous, he said tightly. They carry poison. Mara's mind raced. Have you ever seen them bite anyone? His silence was answer enough. Mara took a breath. Then you don't know. You assume. Because someone told you. Alaric's eyes flashed. My sister's physician. Dr. Corvin Sterling. Mara's stomach turned. That name. It felt too connected to everything, The contract, the secrecy, the fear. Your queen, Mara said softly. Isabella. What was she like? The question struck him like an arrow. For a moment his cold mask slipped, revealing grief so deep it looked like it had carved him hollow. She was light, he whispered. And I failed her. Mara's voice gentled. Sometimes grief makes us obey the wrong people. Alaric's gaze sharpened. Careful. Mara nodded, accepting the danger. I will be. Alaric looked at the triplets again. Leo's lip trembled. Father, Leo whispered. Are we bad? Alaric flinched as if struck. He turned away abruptly, voice rough. I will send fresh blood. Real blood. Not that cheap poison. Mara blinked. You will. Alaric's expression tightened. Don't mistake necessity for kindness. Then he left without another word, but the air felt different after. Because he had looked. Not long, not warmly, but long enough to prove he still had a heart. That afternoon, Mara did what poor girls learn to do when powerful people tell them to stay in their place. She searched anyway. She explored the West Wing when the boys napped. She found a boarded-up sitting room adjacent to the nursery. The wood was old and brittle, as if no one had touched it in years. She pried a plank loose and squeezed through. Dust coated everything like a shroud. Furniture draped in white sheets. A vanity with a dried bouquet of roses, blackened like burned memories. This room had once belonged to Queen Isabella. Mara moved carefully, searching drawers, shelves, the underside of tables. She didn't know what she was looking for until she found it taped beneath the bottom of a writing desk drawer. A leather-bound diary. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was elegant, delicate, but the words were heavy. Beatrix brought me a tonic again today. She watches me drink it. When I drink it, the babies go still. My heart feels like stone. If I die, Alaric must know, it is not the children. It is the tonic. Mara's breath caught hard. This wasn't a curse. This was murder wearing perfume. But Mara also knew something else, something survival had taught her. Truth without power was just a spark in the wrong wind. If Mara ran to Alaric with a diary, Lady Beatrix could dismiss it, twist it, destroy Mara before she took another breath. Mara needed proof. And she needed Alaric to bond with the boys enough that he would choose them over his sister. She returned to the nursery, hiding the diary in her clothes like it was a heartbeat. That night, servants delivered fresh blood under heavy security, sealed containers with a crest. The triplets drank and color returned slowly to their cheeks. Their eyes brightened. Silas' irises shifted from dull red to a clearer shade, still unusual but no longer sickly. Ezra's laugh came easier. Leo stopped apologizing for existing. Mara watched it all, anger rising. They weren't cursed. They were poisoned and starved. And someone had wanted them kept weak. Late that night, Mara heard footsteps outside the iron door. Not Halro. Not guards. A soft knock, almost hesitant. Mara opened the door carefully. King Alaric stood there, face unreadable. I heard, he said quietly, they ate without incident. Mara nodded. Because they are not what you were told. Alaric's eyes flickered. If you have something to say, say it. Mara swallowed hard and took a risk. Your sister, Lady Beatrix, controls too much. Alaric's jaw tightened. You don't understand my family. I understand power, Mara whispered. And I understand what it does to people who want more. Alaric's gaze sharpened. You speak boldly for a maid. Mara met his eyes. I speak boldly for children who can't. Alaric stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable passing through his expression. Anger, curiosity, and something else, a quiet pull he didn't want to name. Finally, he said, Tomorrow my sister returns from the capital. Mara's chest tightened. She's coming here? Alaric nodded, voice cold. And if you have involved yourself in matters beyond your station, she will not be gentle. Mara's grip tightened on the diary hidden beneath her dress. Then neither will I, she whispered. Alaric's eyes flashed violet briefly. Then, so subtle Mara almost didn't notice, his gaze dropped to where the triplets slept, safe for the first time. And his voice softened by a fraction. Be careful, Mara Ellery. It was the closest thing to a warning. And the closest thing to protection. Lady Beatrix and the cure, that wasn't one. Lady Beatrix arrived like a storm dressed in silk. The manner changed the moment her carriage rolled through the gates. Servants straightened, eyes lowered. Guards doubled. Even the candles seemed to burn smaller. Mara watched from the West Wing corridor as Beatrix stepped inside, tall, flawless, smiling with a warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Her hair was pale gold, her jewelry ancient. She carried herself like the crown already belonged to her. She kissed Alaric's cheek as if she owned him. "Brother," she purred, "you look tired." Alaric's face stayed cold. "You shouldn't have come unannounced." Beatrix's smile sharpened. "And miss meeting my precious nephews?" Mara felt her blood chill. Beatrix turned, and her gaze landed on Mara like a blade finding soft skin. "And you," Beatrix said sweetly. "You must be the new girl causing noise." Halro stepped forward quickly. "My lady, she." Beatrix lifted a finger. Halro silenced instantly. Beatrix approached Mara slowly. "Tell me your name." "Mara," Mara said, keeping her voice steady. Beatrix leaned in, inhaling as if smelling fear. "Ah, human." Mara didn't flinch. Beatrix's eyes gleamed. "Humans are so fragile." Alaric's voice cut in. "Leave her." Beatrix blinked, feigning innocence. "I'm only welcoming your staff." Then she turned toward the iron door to the nursery. Mara stepped forward automatically, blocking the way. Beatrix's eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me?" Mara's heart hammered, but she didn't move. "The children are resting." Beatrix smiled wider. "How admirable. You think you can give orders in my brother's home?" Alaric's voice dropped. "Beatrix." Beatrix's gaze slid to him, playful but sharp. "Brother, don't tell me you've grown sentimental." Then she looked back at Mara, voice silky. "Move." Mara held her ground. "They're not beasts." Silence. Beatrix's smile remained, but the air around it turned colder. "What did you just call them?" "I called them children," Mara said, voice trembling but firm. "And they deserve better." Beatrix laughed softly. "Poor thing. You've been fooled by pretty faces and sad eyes." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Mara could hear. "If you get attached, you'll die." Mara's stomach clenched. "Is that a threat?" Beatrix's eyes sparkled. "It's advice." Then she brushed past Mara as if Mara were air and pressed her hand against the iron door. The lock clicked open. Mara's pulse spiked. "No." Alaric moved faster than sight, appearing between Beatrix and the door, his eyes glowing violet. "You will not," he said. Beatrix's face stilled, just for a second, then she sighed dramatically. "Still obsessed with pretending you're in control." Alaric's voice was ice. "You came for a reason. Speak it." Beatrix clasped her hands. "Fine. I brought Dr. Sterling. He has developed an improved containment method. A cure, if you will." Mara's blood ran cold at the name. Sterling. The man from the dock. As if summoned, Dr. Corvin Sterling stepped into view, tall, immaculate, polite. His smile was professional. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly to Alaric. "My condolences for your burdens." Mara watched his eyes flick briefly toward the west wing, calculating. Sterling looked at Mara. "Ah, the new maid." Mara kept her expression blank. Sterling's smile widened. "How fortunate." That night, Beatrix hosted dinner in the grand hall. Mara wasn't invited, she was ordered to serve. It was humiliation dressed as duty. Noble vampires looked at her like she was a decorative object. Some whispered about the human experiment. Others smirked, asking if she enjoyed playing mother to monsters. Mara held her chin high and poured wine without shaking. Until Beatrix raised her glass and said loudly, "To my brother's mercy. He keeps dangerous things locked away, even when his heart protests." The room laughed politely. Alaric's grip tightened on his goblet, but he said nothing. Mara's stomach burned with anger. Beatrix's gaze flicked to Mara. "Tell me, Mara," she said sweetly, "have you ever seen the princes hungry?" Mara's throat tightened. Beatrix leaned forward. "Because hunger is when the curse blooms." Sterling added calmly, "The boys are unstable. Their blood is corrupted." Mara wanted to scream. Instead, she smiled politely. "They've been calm since receiving proper nourishment." Beatrix laughed, delighted. Listen to her. She thinks feeding them solves centuries of darkness. Then Beatrix turned to Alaric, voice honeyed. "Brother, let Sterling administer the treatment tomorrow. If it works, the world will finally stop whispering that the Night Crown cannot control his own heirs." Alaric's eyes flashed. "And if it harms them?" Sterling smiled gently. "Impossible. I designed it to stabilize their biology." Mara's hands clenched beneath the serving tray. Because she knew exactly what stabilize meant when ambitious people spoke. It meant control. That night, Mara returned to the nursery and told the boys gently, "Tomorrow you must stay close to me." Silas' eyes widened. "Are we in trouble?" Mara swallowed. "Someone is coming who may pretend to help." Ezra whispered, Aunt Beatrix. Leo curled into Mara's side, trembling. She hates us. Mara's chest ached. Then we don't give her the chance. In the early hours before dawn, Mara sneaked back into the Queen's sitting room and searched deeper. Behind a loose panel in the vanity, she found something wrapped in cloth. A small vial, empty with a faint residue at the bottom. And beside it, folded carefully, a letter in Isabella's handwriting, unfinished. If you find this, know that I tried. Beatrix's tonic is not medicine. Sterling is not a healer. They want my children weak. They want the crown. The rest was smudged as if tears had blurred it. Mara's hands shook. Proof. Not enough to convict, but enough to break a lie. When Mara returned to the nursery, she found Alaric standing inside, staring at his sons while they slept. He looked like a man watching something he'd been denied. Mara froze. Alaric didn't turn. My sister thinks I will agree to Sterling's procedure. Mara's voice came out soft. Will you? Alaric's jaw tightened. I don't know. Mara stepped closer carefully. Then let me show you what you do know. She pulled out the diary. Alaric turned sharply, eyes flaring. Where did you get that? Mara's voice trembled. From Isabella's room. She wrote, she warned you. Alaric's face went pale in a way vampires rarely did. Mara opened to the last pages and read quietly. It's not the children, Mara whispered. It was the tonic. Alaric's eyes locked on the handwriting like it was a ghost reaching for him. His voice cracked. This could be forged. Mara swallowed. Then test Sterling's cure. Test his tonic. Ask why your sons were kept malnourished on cheap synthetic blood until they looked sick enough to prove their curse. Alaric's hands trembled slightly as he took the diary. For a long moment, the King of the Night looked less like a monster and more like a broken husband who realized too late that love had been weaponized against him. Beatrix, he whispered, the name tasting like betrayal. Mara's heart pounded. Choose them, she pleaded softly, before she takes them from you completely. Alaric stared at Mara, really stared, like he was seeing her for the first time not as a maid but as a force. A human who stood in a house of predators and refused to bow. And in his eyes something shifted, slow, reluctant, inevitable. Respect. And beneath it, the first spark of something warmer. Tomorrow, he said quietly, Sterling will not touch my sons. Mara's breath released in relief. Then Alaric added, voice turning dangerous, but if I move against Beatrix without proof, she will strike first. Mara nodded. Then we get proof. Alaric's gaze dropped to her lips for a brief second, so brief it could be imagined, then lifted again, colder. You are playing in royal blood, Mara Ellery? Mara whispered, then protect me. Alaric's eyes flashed violet, and his answer came not as words, but as a vow spoken by the way he stepped closer to his sleeping sons, placing himself between them and the world. I will, he said quietly, even if it destroys me. The coup in the dark and the maid who spoke the old tongue. Morning came with knives hidden behind smiles. Beatrix arrived at the west wing with Sterling and 2 armored guards carrying a silver case. Mara stood in the corridor, hands clenched, while Alaric appeared beside her like a shadow. Beatrix's smile was bright. Brother. Ready to save your sons? Alaric's voice was flat. Sterling will not enter. Beatrix blinked, surprised. Excuse me? Alaric held up Isabella's diary. My wife wrote this. She feared your tonic. For the first time Beatrix's smile faltered, then returned stronger, almost amused. Oh darling brother, she sighed. A diary? From a dying woman? You know grief makes people paranoid. Mara stepped forward. Test the tonic. Test Sterling's cure. Sterling's eyes flickered. Humans shouldn't speak in royal matters. Mara didn't back down. Humans shouldn't be treated like disposable witnesses either. Beatrix's gaze sharpened. You're brave. Mara's voice was steady. I'm tired of fear. Beatrix laughed lightly. Then you'll be tired forever. She snapped her fingers. The guards moved. Not toward the nursery. Toward Mara. Mara's blood chilled as one guard grabbed her arm hard. Alaric's eyes flared violet. The corridor shook slightly, candles flickered, metal groaned. Release her, Alaric growled. Beatrix lifted a hand. Brother, calm down. I'm only removing a disruptive servant. She's influenced your judgment. Mara's heart pounded. Alaric. Beatrix's head tilted. Did she just call you by name? The court behind her murmured. Alaric went still. And Mara realized the trap. Beatrix wanted the court to see Mara as a manipulator, An unworthy human controlling the king. Beatrix smiled. How sweet. A little pet who thinks she can tame the night crown. Mara's cheeks burned, but she forced her voice calm. I'm not taming him. I'm reminding him he's a father. Beatrix's eyes hardened. And I'm reminding you that humans do not get to survive insolence. Sterling opened the silver case. Inside was a syringe filled with black-red liquid that shimmered strangely. Mara's stomach turned. That's not medicine, Mara whispered. Sterling smiled. It's stabilization. Beatrix stepped closer to Alaric, voice low. Let me do this, or I will tell the court you've lost control. And they will demand your crown. Alaric's jaw tightened. Mara suddenly understood. This was bigger than the boys. This was a coup. Beatrix didn't just want the triplets contained. She wanted Alaric weakened, publicly shamed, then replaced. Mara's mind raced. Proof. They needed proof now. Then something strange happened. Leo's small voice came from inside the nursery door, frightened but clear. Mara? Mara's breath caught. The door was still locked, but Leo was close, listening. Mara spoke softly, hoping he'd hear. It's okay, sweetheart. Stay back. Beatrix's eyes narrowed. They're awake. Sterling's smile sharpened. Perfect time to administer. Alaric stepped forward, blocking the door. No. Beatrix's voice turned icy. Move. Alaric didn't. Beatrix's gaze slid to Mara again, calculating. Then we remove the problem. She nodded at the guard gripping Mara. The guard yanked Mara forward. Pain shot through Mara's shoulder. And in the panic, without thinking, Mara shouted the first words that came to her heart, not English, not modern speech, but something old. Something that felt like it had lived in her bones long before she was born. Nerith Velthorin, stop. The corridor went still. The guards froze mid-motion like statues. Sterling's syringe hand trembled. Beatrix's eyes widened. Alaric whipped his head toward Mara, shock ripping through his cold mask. Because Mara had spoken the ancient tongue of the Night Court, the language only pure-blood vampire royals knew. And she had spoken it with authority. Mara didn't understand how she knew it. But she saw the effect. Silence. Fear. Beatrix whispered, almost soundless, impossible. Sterling's face tightened, losing control for the first time. Where did you learn that? Mara's heart hammered. I don't know. Alaric stepped close, voice low. Say it again. Mara swallowed, then spoke softly, the words sliding out like memory. Nerith Velthorin. The guards released her instantly, stepping back like ashamed children. Beatrix's composure returned, but it was brittle now, like glass hiding cracks. So, she murmured, smiling too hard, our maid is not just a maid. Alaric's eyes burned violet. Explain. Beatrix lifted her hands innocently. I can't. But clearly she's dangerous. Mara realized it. Beatrix would twist this too. She would paint Mara as a witch, a spy, a threat, anything to justify removing her. Mara's mind moved fast. She pointed at Sterling's case. Test it? No. If it's medicine, it won't harm normal blood. Sterling's jaw clenched. That's not how. Mara cut in, voice sharp. If it's stabilization, you can show it's safe. Alaric's gaze locked on Sterling. Do it. For the first time, Sterling hesitated. The crown that chose her. The Night Court did not forgive easily. It watched. It whispered. It waited. News of Lady Beatrice's fall spread through the hidden world like fire through dry leaves. Some called it justice. Others called it madness. A few called it weakness, proof that King Alaric Valmont had finally lost the iron control that made him feared. And all of them said the same thing in the end. A human maid did this. Elara felt the weight of it everywhere she went. The way courtiers paused when she entered a room. The way nobles studied her like a flaw in the world's design. The way guards tensed, unsure whether to bow or block her path. She was still human. Still fragile. Still exactly the same girl who had arrived with borrowed shoes and desperation stitched into her bones. But the manner was changing. And so was the king. The triplets healed faster than anyone expected. Silas began asking questions. About history, about power, about why lies lasted so long when truth was stronger. Ezra learned patience, sitting for hours with books and puzzles, his sharp mind drinking in knowledge like it had once drunk fear. Lucian learned laughter without flinching. They slept without chains. They ate without muzzles. They dreamed without screaming. Every night before bed they asked the same question. Will you stay? Elara always answered the same way. I'm right here. King Alaric watched those moments from the doorway, heart aching with a grief that no longer crushed, but burned. One evening, as Alara tucked the boys in, Silas spoke quietly. They say the court wants you gone. Alara stilled. Who says that? Everyone, Ezra replied. They think humans shouldn't change kings. Lucian clutched her sleeve. Will they take you away? Alara smiled softly even as fear curled in her chest. No one decides that but me. And the king. The council convened under a blood-red moon. Ancient vampires filled the chamber. Lords of shadow, queens of night, beings who had ruled centuries before Alara's ancestors learned to write. Their gazes were sharp, judgmental, unforgiving. King Alaric stood at the center. Alara stood beside him. Unarmed. Unbowed. This human has compromised you, one lord sneered. Your rule weakens. She exposed treason, Alaric replied calmly, and saved my heirs. By bleeding for them, another scoffed. Sentiment. Alaric's eyes flashed. Courage. You would place the fate of the Night Court in human hands? A matriarch demanded. Alaric didn't hesitate. I already did. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Alara's breath caught. Alaric turned to her then, not as a king addressing a subject, but as a man choosing truth over fear. You walked into my darkness, he said, voice steady, carrying to every corner of the room. You protected my sons when I could not. You challenged my power without seeking it. He took her hand. And because of that, he continued, I name you under my protection. Not as a servant. Not as a pawn. Murmurs erupted. Alara's pulse thundered. Alaric knelt. The Night Court froze. I ask you, he said, eyes never leaving hers, to stand beside me. Not above. Not below. As equal conscience. As guardian of what I forgot. The silence was absolute. Alara looked at the faces around her, fearful, angry, uncertain. She looked at the weight of a world that had never been kind to the weak. Then she looked at the king who had learned to kneel. I won't rule through fear, she said softly. Neither will I, Alaric replied. She nodded once. I'll stay. The crown pulsed. The Night Court felt it. Power did not explode. It settled. They didn't call her queen at first. They called her a mistake. A threat. A weakness. But the triplets stood tall at her side, healthy and radiant proof of the lie that had ruled them. And King Alaric ruled differently now, firm, just unafraid of compassion. Punishments became fair. Lies became dangerous. Kindness became strength. And slowly, inevitably, the whispers changed. The human didn't steal the crown. The crown chose her. One quiet night, Alara stood on the balcony overlooking Valmont Manor. The world felt vast, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. Alaric joined her, cloak brushing stone. You saved us, he said. She shook her head. You chose to see. He studied her, eyes no longer cold. Stay, he asked, not as a king but as a man. Alara smiled gently. I never left. Behind them, 3 boys laughed in the halls, free, safe, alive. The Night Court endured. The curse died. And a poor human maid proved a truth older than blood itself. Power bows to kindness.